Go ahead and get started at 8:02. So we'll just give folks that last moment to trickle in. I know that sometimes it can take a while for people to boot up their computers, getting ready for that 8 o'clock start. So if other people trickle in the meantime, that's okay. We'll just go ahead and go through a bit of an introduction before we dive into the meat of the presentation. So my name is Jessica Keegan. I'm coming to you from the Office of Economic Empowerment, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. We are super excited to be partnering with M&T Bank today to lead this credit and scam and fraud prevention virtual workshop, which is one of a series of 4 sessions, partnering with the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, which we are super, super happy to continue partnering with them. So I will go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is a series of 4. If you notice, we are here in that second category, credit and scam and fraud credit and scam and fraud prevention. Again, no coffee, just water, you can tell. And coming up next Wednesday, same time as this session, is our mobile banking virtual workshop. And the week after that, the same time on the next Wednesday, is our basics of home buying virtual workshops. You can see the bit.lys here, which are just shortened links, but I'll go ahead and put those in the chat once we are set and transitioning, in case you would like to share the news or register, which we would definitely welcome both. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. The Office of Economic Empowerment, just share some disclosures and housekeeping. Then we'll dive into the credit and scam and fraud prevention workshop, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So the Office of Economic Empowerment is a department within the Massachusetts State Treasurer and Receiver General's Office. We aim to deliver programs to all residents of Massachusetts and at every stage of their lives, regardless of their economic background. We also offer initiatives tailored to meet the unique financial experience of veterans, women, high school students, and older adults, which is why we are here today working alongside with M&T and the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. So this is a Zoom webinar. It will be recorded. This recording will be sent to you later for your reference, but it also may be uploaded onto a public website for future use, but we will definitely send you that link. Since we are subject to public record laws, the chat is not anonymous, but you can share questions that will be anonymous. So please feel free to use any of those functions like the Q&A in the chat to ask questions or speak to us. So you may have noticed that this is a webinar and not a standard Zoom meeting. This means you're not going to be able to turn on your camera or your microphone. But again, you'll be able to use that Q&A function or the chat to speak with us. And once you exit out today from this webinar, a little survey will pop asking if you like this. So just let us know what your feedback would be, because that's how we know what content to make sure to give to you so that you can be the best person you can be. So I'll go ahead and pop these links in the chat again. If you're not already registered, please feel free to. We have the mobile banking session coming up and the basics of home buying. I'll say that these two, the credit, scam, and fraud, and last week's banking and budgeting, are a bit of our classic evergreen workshops, and we don't do as many of the mobile banking and the basics of home buying workshops. Exactly, the basics of home buying will be our first time leading that workshop, so super exciting. Definitely register for those, and I will stop sharing my screen and turn this over to Dutch to start sharing the actual exciting content. So I'll pop those in the chat, and Dutch, you can go ahead.
All right, so good morning, everyone. And let me just make sure that you see the actual slides and not my full notes. Jessica, before your video turn off, just give me a thumbs up if that's the case. And if it is, all right, then I am actually also going to turn off my video, make it so, because I want to make sure we have less difficulty, or actually change my view, have less difficulty with audio and video. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining early on the day. I hope you're all getting ready for a cold weekend. And like I said last week, nothing better to start the day than with an introduction in financial education. And before we dive into today's topic, just like Jessica, just a few household rules to explain our goals and objectives and how the Q&A would work. Keep in mind that our overall goal with all these workshops is to give you additional resources, share some knowledge that hopefully will empower you to help your work with the elderly. We are truly very grateful for our partnership with the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, as well as the Office of Economic Empowerment. And our overall goal at M&T Bank is to uplift our communities, and financial education is just truly an important part of that. Especially since the pandemic, we've seen there's been a higher need for financial education, and this whole workshop session hopefully will help you in your work with the elderly community, and also help yourself and maybe your family and other members in your direct circle that have some questions around financial education. There's other resources available to you, so please make sure that you check out the websites for the Office of Economic Empowerment, for the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, the M&T Bank websites. There's a fantastic website called Financial Life MA, which offers customized modules to learn about financial education. And all these resources, again, will hopefully give you additional tools to learn more about the basics of finance. None of these trainings, none of these resources are designed to turn you into experts or financial advisor of any type of certification. And please continue to visit your own financial experts, your own branch, your own bank and advisors to review your personal scenario or the elderly community if there's such a need. There is a pretty full session, right? We have 2 topics today, credit score reporting as well as fraud prevention. So hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. We would ask you to add those into the chat feature, and if we have the chance to get through it, we will, and otherwise we will follow up with email. Again, my name is Dutch Kolthoff. I work for M&T Bank in the Financial Education Department, and I run that department together with my colleague Jordan Green, who's smiling on the picture. And that's the intro. So let's get started and let's talk about what we can do and hopefully can do when we talk about topics around financial education. So let me go to the next slide. Again, today we're going to talk about credit scores and credit reporting. We'll also talk identity theft, protection against identity theft, and we're also going to talk about some common scams and fraud attempts that you might see on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, we'll share some resources and next steps. Before we get started, let's make sure everybody's on board. And we're going to ask with a poll question. So how well do you know your credit score? Jessica, if you could put up the poll. How well do you know your credit score? Do you know it exactly? Do you think you have a rough idea? You don't know your score, or even worse, you actually have no idea what an actual credit score even is. So do me a favor, quickly respond on the poll question, and Jessica will share them with you in just a sec. And then we're going to talk and see what we can do. All right. Oh, pretty even. Very nice. So about half of you say, yeah, I kind of know what it is. I have a pretty good idea. Versus a few of you that know it very well. And then a couple that say, I really don't know. So this is a good resource for me to try to find out how I can find out where I can find a credit score. So what is a credit score? Let's start there. It's a 3-digit rating, and it's truly a snapshot that lenders use to kind of give them idea of how well you would be able, now likely which are you to repay a debt. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. I moved to the States when I was 22. And one of the reasons that I'm in financial education is because I've made a lot of mistakes, and there was a lot of information around the US banking system that I truly just had no idea about. And credit score and credit rating was probably the most difficult thing for me to understand. The fact that there was a rating out there that would impact how I would be able to get loans and credit cards. And at the same time, there was all this information to try to get credit. So I've been in this whole gamut of what you see here. There's a 3-digit rating that goes anywhere from under 580, which is considered poor, all the way up to 850, which is considered exceptional. And depending on where your credit score rating falls in this gambit of scores, your interest rate, your repayment options could be impacted. So it's important to know what your credit score is. It's important to watch your credit score, especially when you're considering applying for some type of loan or credit card in the near future. The credit score is made up out of 5 different pieces, right? And the most important piece, there's 2 of them, but the most important piece is the payment history. How well have you paid? 35% of your credit score depends on how well you've paid your loans and your credit cards in the past. Another big piece, almost a third, is the total amount owed. So if you have credit cards, if you have loans, what is your outstanding balances? The length of your credit history is important. Are you somebody who is newly applying to credit and is applying to a lot of different credit cards? Or are you someone who's had a credit history, has a history of making payments on time, and has been able to manage their amounts owed quite well? Which ties into new credit. A lot of banks might get a little nervous if you've had a pretty steady amount of credit card, a pretty steady amount of loans in the past, and all of a sudden you're applying for different type of new credits, new loans, new car loans, new credit cards because of reward systems. As a lender, our first concern would be, okay, is something changing in the income? Is something changing in the budgeting that we talked about last week? Is something happening in this person's personal life that impacts their need to apply for new credit? So don't apply for new credit too often. And then the last one is types of credit, and we'll discuss that in more detail. But there's two options. Is your credit a revolving credit, like credit cards, where you pay off the balance and can use the amount again? Or these fixed loans, like car loans, like mortgages, like some personal loans, where every month you pay the same amount of money and then eventually that loan will end? So those are the 5 different items that make up a credit score and that help a lender determine a snapshot and give them an idea of how well we think you'd be able to pay back a loan. These credit scores are calculated by 3 different credit bureaus: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Those are the 3 companies that keep track of your credit. There's other online resources, but most lenders will use these 3, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, to see and keep track of all your activities on different credit resources. If you currently have a credit card, one of the benefits of the pandemic has been that access to credit scores and access to credit reporting has been easier. So even though these 3 bureaus, credit bureaus, are still the 3 main reporting agencies, a lot of credit cards, a lot of banks do allow their participants and are the credit card holders to access their credit score or their credit report on a pretty regular basis for free. And that's a good thing. We all want to know what's happening. The score relates to your report, and the score is calculated based on how you've managed your credit in the past. And that's all put together in a credit report, which shows your credit history. It shows those payments. It shows other information that will help determine the lender your ability to repay debt. It also shares personal information like your address, some work history, other people that inquire on your report, and we'll share that in a little more detail in just a second. It's important to look at your credit report at least annually, right? And one way to do so is by going to this government website, annualcreditreport.com. There you have the ability to get a credit report from each of the 3 agencies once a year, completely free. And before the pandemic, I would recommend that every 4 months you would highlight your calendar and you'd say, all right, first time I do Experian, 4 months later I'll do Equifax, 4 months later I'll do TransUnion. And go to annual credit report, answer a few questions, and you have the ability to look at your report and you can download it. Again, another benefit of the pandemic has been that we want to have people more access to their credit report. So you now can actually do this more often. If you want to do this monthly, feel free to do so. If you want to do this through your credit cards, feel free to do so. There's absolutely no disadvantage for you personally looking at your credit report and making sure that anything on your report looks like it should. You can also get a free report if you feel that there was fraud, if you need to apply for welfare, or if you were denied a loan or credit application. But it's important that you take a look at this. And this is for you, this is for your family. My daughter is about to turn 18. We're going to start her first credit report. Just right from the beginning, she has a good understanding of what to look for. But especially for the elderly, if you work with the elderly, I would recommend that you share with them how they can look at a credit report. Hopefully they're at the stage in their life that they don't need to apply for a lot of credit, but unfortunately they are victims of scams. There is a lot of fraud activity and there's people looking to try to get into credit applications pretending to be the elderly. And the credit report is a good way to see if anybody looks at your credit, looks at your activities, and is trying to apply for credit. Not only the credit accounts with their open and closed accounts and their current payment status is on your report. It will share personal information, your name and your birth date. You can have your social security number listed or not, address, employer data. It will show you any organization or agencies that have requested to verify your credit. And it also shares public records, lawsuits, bankruptcies, judgments, any unpaid taxes. And those can stay on your credit report. Some tax judgments can actually stay for up to 10 years. But a good rule of thumb is that any type of information on your credit report will stay there for 7 years. And the impact it can have on your score and therefore your ability to get new credit or better rates can be impacted for up to 7 years. You always want to look at dates when you look at your credit report. When does it show that an account was opened? If a delinquency is reported, is that true? And when did it happen? Are you getting closer to that 5 or 7 year window? Same thing for public records and especially credit requests. Is anybody trying to apply for credit in your name? And if that's recent, are you aware of it? Or is that happening without you even knowing that it was going to happen? It shouldn't, but you want to take a look at credit requests, and we'll talk about a second what type of different requests you can have. There's actually hard credits. Actually, I'll do it right now. There's hard credit requests and there's soft credit requests, soft inquiries. So if you physically apply for a loan, if you physically apply for a credit card, and you personally want somebody to look at your credit report and make a determination, that's called a hard credit inquiry. And that is a credit request that will impact your overall score because somebody is physically looking, taking your permission and is looking at your income and your repayment history. Again, you don't want too many of those, but if you're looking to get new credit, that's called a hard credit score, and it's important to do so. You might also see soft inquiries. Those will not impact your score. If you personally look at your credit, that's completely okay. Your cell phone company, your utility company, some credit card companies that are thinking about offering you a new card might look at your credit report. Those are called soft inquiries. That's how they're listed on your report. And those have no actual impact on your overall score, but it might give you an indication that your information, your name, your social is out in the world if all of a sudden you see additional credit requests that didn't really happen before. So just something to take a look at when you look at credit requests. Credit requests is one of the main indicators for future fraud. It's also one of the main indicators to see if your name is out in the internet, if people are starting to look at data that maybe you don't want them to look at. If there's anything on your credit report that you don't like, if there's anything on your report that shouldn't be there, when you go to annualcredit.com, you actually have the ability to dispute an item directly online, which is fantastic. So you can make a written request and say, hey, I noticed there's a late payment. I was never late. Here's my payment history. Here's the payment for the specific month that you indicated. Any type of data that you can provide would be fantastic. If you or the elderly population do not have access to the internet, you can also write a letter directly to the reporting agency. They need, by law, they need to respond within 30 days. And normally if you have proof and if you have an history where you can show that payments were made on time, you have the ability to take items that are in dispute off your credit report, which will then help your overall score. And I would recommend that you continue to dispute items. Sometimes people feel, it's only a small inquiry, it's not that important. Like I mentioned a second ago, inquiries are a good indication of your information being out in the free world and people trying to access but information that maybe they shouldn't. So let's make sure you take a look. And if there's anything on your report that shouldn't be there, try to make sure you have that disputed or removed. Overall, by watching your credit report, by watching your score, by not applying for too many products too quickly, you should be able, and if you make your payments on time, you should be able to have a credit score that is sufficient to get new loans and new lines. I told you I was an immigrant. When I first came to the States, I was amazed that every shop I walked into, the moment I wanted to purchase something, one of the very first questions was, hey, would you like to apply for a retail credit card and get a 10% discount, whatever the case might be. I fell into the gap of applying for a lot of credit too quickly. So what happened when I applied for credit too quickly is my credit score as a whole dropped because all of a sudden the amount that I owed or was I able to own went up quickly. And there was a lot of new credit. There was no history of payment. There was a lot of new credit. So my credit score started getting lower, which then led to new applications being denied. right? A lower credit score means new applications get denied. And all of a sudden, because one item got denied, other items got denied as well, or my rate would get higher. Some credit card companies that would approve me for, let's say, a $5,000 card, when they noticed that my score was dropping or there was declines coming on my report, they sent me a letter saying, hey, your $5,000 limit is now reduced to a $1,000 limit, which impacted the overall amount owed as a percentage of my score, which lowered my score again. So I learned the hard way that credit really has an impact in the ability to borrow, the ability to borrow at a good rate, the ability to make sure that items remain affordable. And I learned the hard way that good credit does not mean that you need to have 10 credit cards, right? If you look back at the initial scenario, what makes up a good credit score? There was nothing there that says number of cards or number of loans. It's the total amount owed and the percentage of amount owed. So I had to repair my credit quickly, and I had to find ways to repair my credit. So you can do that. One, like I said, monitor your credit and your scores, pay your bills on time. But if you find yourself in a scenario where credit becomes a problem or your credit score becomes a problem, don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help. Is there a way that I could have counseling? We at the bank are fully able to help you. There's a lot of online resources that we share. There's actually the Credit Repair Organizations Act. There's protections in place to help credit and to help make sure that consumers have the ability to repair their credit. And there's different financial products in place that can help with that. We're part of the Bank On Certified network where we help people establish bank accounts and credit accounts. And one of the products that a lot of banks offer is a secured credit card, where you have the ability to put some money in a savings account. And against that savings account, you can get a credit card. So there's no risk for the bank because you have secured money in a savings account. There's no risk for you because you have secured money in a savings account to pay off the card if there was difficulty. But you have the ability to start showing a history again of having a card and paying it on time, having a card, paying it on time. So there's ways to repair credit without having to go into bankruptcy, without having to go into high fee organizations that can help with that by talking to an advisor and getting a little counseling. And eventually you can get it back out of it. So I quickly mentioned that there is the Credit Repair Organizations Act that wants to help people and protect the consumer against false advertising. And that's something to keep in mind. If you had difficulty with credit and you're saying, okay, I'm looking to repair, obviously there's a lot of credit repair scams out there as well. And we'll talk about any of these scams in the middle. But if you get offered assistance and people say, hey, just pay us an upfront fee and we'll make sure we'll take care of all your negative information. We'll promise we're going to scrub all your information. If people say, hey, don't contact the credit bureaus yourself, we'll do that for you. You'll pay us a fee and we'll take care of everything. Just sign on a piece of paper. It seems that those are very common sense items not to do, but especially people that are in need of better credit, people are looking for a quick resolution to credit, and unfortunately elderly who are somewhat trusted or grown up to be a little bit more trustworthy or believe that people are more trustworthy than they really are. Many times are targeted for credit repair scams and signed documents or promise to pay fees up front for services that are not really happening. So just keep your eye out. Again, it all starts with monitoring your own report and don't applying for too much credit if not needed. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling can help. The Financial Coaching Association of America can help. Here are two links that are in the slides. And again, if you have a good relationship with your own financial advisor or your bank, it's always helpful to come in and say, hey, is there something you'd be able to help me at as well? So some strategies, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Big part of your credit score is the amount owed. If you have the ability to use less than 30% of your available credit, it will help your overall credit score. We always recommend you pay off your bills and pay your bills on time if possible. But to help your credit score, definitely try to stay under 30% of your available credit. And that's the total amount of credit you have access to. Do not max out your credit cards. There's really no need. And obviously, if you have a financial emergency, you might have to. But to build your credit score and to have a strong credit report, Again, try to remain under that 30% figure or better. Do not max out your cards unless you can pay them off each month, because as a bank and as a lender, that's one of the items we want to see, right? Are you able to manage your credit responsibly? And you don't need to borrow every month. Pay off your loans on time. Do not apply for multiple loans and credit cards. We managed to discuss that already. And then if you were part of our class last week, create and follow a monthly budget or a savings plans that can help you reduce debt. We shared some examples how it's so important to look at your credit as part of your overall savings and debt management plan. So if you have a budget, one lesson is to make sure you pay yourself first and have a savings plan, right? You want to reach your goals and you want to get that boat for Dutch. And second, if you have debt, you want to make sure you reduce that debt as quickly as you can while continuing to save. So create that budget, follow that budget, and we shared some information last week that might help. And then, like I mentioned a few times, look. Make sure that you take a look, make sure that you follow, make sure that you monitor your credit report as often as you feel is necessary. There's no disadvantage of doing it yourself. Okay. All right, so we quickly, and again, we're doing quick webinars each week. Sometimes this is truly one topic that we normally can spend an hour on. But we kind of condensed the information so you understand how important credit scores and reporting are, how you can access your information and build some strategies, and how you can protect yourself from incorrect claims and fraud. If there's one thing I'd like you to take away from the summary around credit score and credit reporting, is the ability to monitor your report and receive a copy of your report for free, and take a look at your report and all the history that is reported on your credit history. If you have difficulty doing that, or if you feel the elderly population that you work with should have access to that, it's very easy to go to annualcreditreport.com, and I'm certain that you could walk into any of the banks. I know you can with us, and people can show you how you can pull your own copy, how you can print your own copy, and at least take a good look. Okay, so it's important. It impacts everything you do on a day-to-day basis. I am a renter right now, and once a year I have to provide my credit report because it can impact how my landlord looks at my rent. And that's completely understandable, and that's fair, because again, I had some difficulty in the past. So now that I'm in better shape, I continue to monitor on a regular basis, and it impacts almost everything we do. Lesson learned, and it's important. So what I don't want to happen is, now that my credit is in good shape, I don't want people to look at my credit report and say, hey, let's become Dutch. Let's steal Dutch's identity and start applying for items in his name, and take advantage of the fact that Dutch might not be watching his credit report on a regular basis. So we'll talk about identity theft, and we'll talk about scam prevention in the next half hour or so. Truly important topic. Unfortunately, more and more scams, more and more identity theft is happening on a daily basis. I wish that the people that spend all this time in stealing our money would take some of their focus on helping us make more money and make the world a better place. Because last year, just the elderly population was a victim to over $3 billion of money lost in identity theft, and just the elderly. So people you work with on a daily basis. I work with immigrants and refugees quite often, where there's a certain distrust about US banking. They're targeted for victims. Any population that we would consider easier to target because they might not have full awareness of the US banking system, they're easy targets, unfortunately, for identity theft. You work with the elderly on a daily basis. You might have a network of people that, just like me, were born and raised in other countries. It's important not just to share the story around the importance of credit and credit reporting, but also the story around identity theft. So we'll talk a little bit today about how you can identify signs of identity theft, some different types of identity theft and fraud, some strategies that can help you learn how to protect your data and keep your habits safe. And we'll talk about some common scams that are happening right now in the next 30 minutes or so. But before we do, wake up time, just making sure you guys are still with me. So here's a poll question, true or false? And we're gonna have two answers for you. There's a identity 2 seconds, not just an attempt to make somebody a victim, but an actual victim of identity theft every 2 seconds. And you're more likely to have your identity stolen than to have your car stolen or your home burglarized. Do me a favor, select true or false for both options. True, 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 false, 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 true, whatever you think it would be. And Jessica, let's see how our panel voted. Yes, unfortunately, you guys are all correct, which is kind of sad, right? 100% right. There's a victim of identity theft every 2 seconds. Somebody is a victim. Somebody loses money or is targeted for identity theft and actually a victim. And you are indeed more likely to have your identity stolen and your car stolen. So there's 2 things to keep in mind when we talk about identity theft. And unfortunately, even though I've done this for almost 25 years, I still kind of intermingle the 2. So I apologize ahead of time. So identity theft is when personal information is accessed and stolen, not just for financial gain. So, right, somebody might steal your identity to steal a passport to travel, let's say. Identity fraud is occurring when your information is then used to access money. So unfortunately, there's a lot of coincidences between the 2, but it is important to keep in mind that not all thieves are going after just money. There's other information that they're looking for. And if you're a victim of identity theft, when somebody takes your actual information, it could impact a lot of different aspects of your daily life, not just financially, where you have to borrow money to help with expenses because people stole money, not just using your savings, people stole information. It might be harder to get a job if there's information in your name out there in the world that's not correct. You might not be able to qualify for loans. It might be harder to request and then receive government assistance. And again, this comes in for the elderly. If there's information out there that shows that either income or assets are incorrect. So there's quite an impact on the day-to-day basis if your identity is not protected. A lot of times we talk about people using your information to do illegal transactions, open new bank accounts, commit frauds. More and more, we know that the internet is being used, right? Cyber crimes, where people access your computer, access your data, and use information to transfer money or to access information that they shouldn't. Medical prescriptions, you will see this a lot in your work with the elderly, but more and more theft is happening around medical prescriptions. Unfortunately, we're dealing with an opioid crisis, with a drugs crisis, and people are finding ways to steal people's identity, to order prescriptions, and to get drugs, and even medical treatment. Because you don't receive a bill for medical service until a month or a few months after the actual procedure, it is possible for people to actually receive full medical treatments and have the billing go completely somewhere else. So things to keep in mind, right? Personal information is stolen, and it's not just bank account information anymore. It's biographical data, name, social, address, medical data like medical records, biometric data, financial data. All this personal identifiable information is collected by thieves and then try to use, it to steal information and often to try to get financial gain out of it. Now, it's impossible to hide all your information, right? We'll talk about that in a second, but your name, your address, even your bank information on a check by itself, that's pretty easy to receive. People can look for, they can steal your driver's license. One item by itself normally should continue to keep you safe. It's the combination of items where thieves are looking for, where they're able to truly act as if they are you, steal your identity, and then have the ability to access systems. So you want to be careful and protect yourself in a few different ways. What is it that thieves do? Obviously theft, right? Trying to get your phone out of your wallet, trying to get your checkbook, stealing paperwork directly when you're out and about. So keep your items safe. If you carry a purse, make sure your purse is closed. Seems similar, seems logical. If you go to a Starbucks for coffee, don't leave your cell phone while you go and get your coffee after the order. People will steal the cell phone and try to get in. A lot of people are aware of what's called dumpster diving, where Thieves actually will go into the trash and look for bank statements, look for credit card statements, look for financial statements. There's a lot of paperwork floating around in the financial industry. There's a lot of offers. There's a lot of information being shared. I am a huge fan of protecting yourself against dumpster diving and against mail fraud, not by shredding every single piece of paperwork that comes into your home, but by signing up for automated services. So I don't receive bank statements. I see them on my phone. And I do online banking. I don't receive credit card statements, investment statements, anything that has to do with my financial life. I'm able to get online or via phone. So the only time I get reminded that there is a new statement, I receive an email. There's not too much mail that I receive. You get pre-approved credit card offers. If you get pre-approved sales offers, at the bottom of each of those offers is the option to opt out and say, hey, I don't want to receive those anymore. Especially the elderly, if you're in a scenario that you don't need new products, opt out so you receive less mail, so your information is not out there as often as it normally could be. Shoulder serving seems very strange, but we're always amazed to see people at their ATM machine that literally drop their ATM card in the ATM machine and then pull out a little piece of paper that has the PIN number. And somebody right behind them could look over their shoulder. The same thing happens at a grocery store or a 7-Eleven. So be aware when you access personal information that nobody is right behind you looking at what information you're sharing. Mail fraud, I just mentioned, like a lot of mail being sent, and it could also be offers. Right? You might receive mail for a product or a service that sounds too good to be true. Don't respond, right? And we'll talk about emails in just a second. And last and not least, because this comes up more and more often, skimming. I've seen a few additional highlights on the internet where skimming devices are used. And a skimming device pretty much is a fake ATM card reader, a fake debit card reader that's attached to gas station card readers, even ATM machines and in grocery stores. Anytime that you use your ATM or your debit card to purchase an item, if you notice that the machine seems loose, if you can jiggle it around and it seems to move with the card, there's a chance that it could be a fraudulent machine. So you want to be careful if you use your debit card. I'm a huge fan of the debit cards and the credit cards that have the little Wi-Fi logo. You can actually just tap and go. Those are harder to replicate. So I think those are a safer way to go. But these are some methods that thieves use that on a day-to-day basis, the answer is just be careful. And we're going to talk about some common scams as well: phishing, telephone, elder fraud, and text messaging. And again, these are all scams that happen on a day-to-day basis that could happen to everyone, but unfortunately, you work with the elderly. And I have a specific workshop, 45 minutes, just targeting elderly citizens, because they are targeting more than any other population, specifically because they grew up in a world where people were a little bit more trustworthy. They've seen so many technical changes the last 20 years that they might be a little confused about all the different things that are available. They've saved some money, so they're targets because they have some money. And unfortunately, socially, they might be somewhat isolated, and they are more inclined to talk to people and share information that they shouldn't. So if you work with the elderly, and I know you do, just extra things to look for. So a common scam happening right now, every day, all day, is the phishing email. And really just an email that looks very professional, looks like it comes from your bank, and it's asking for some information or scaring you to say that, hey, your account might be compromised. And you want to look at these emails because often they have spelling errors. Often the greeting is generic. Instead of dear Dutch, it's dear customer. The language is unprofessional in the sense that it's trying to scare you. It's really saying, hey, you better react quickly. There's some urgency. And then every single time, it's asking you to click on a login link, or it's to click on a different link to access a different page. Please, 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 never, ever, ever open an attachment or click on a link in an email. And you're like, oh, Dutch, I know this. That will never happen to me. Every single workshop that I hold, and I've done this for some time, people tell me that either they or a friend made the mistake of clicking an attachment, not realizing that it then opened up their computer or their phone to thieves They were then using that to access other information. No financial institution will ever send you an email asking you to click on a link. And if you feel that the email looks very professional, you're like, this could be from my bank, pick up the phone, call your bank. Did you guys just send me an email? Is something happening with my accounts? Never, ever, ever click on an email that is sent to you that has an attachment or a link. Can't explain it better. Same thing with phone scams. Nobody will ever call you from the bank. Nobody ever will call you from Social Security. Nobody will ever call you from the lottery to let you know that either you won something that you never even applied for or entered, or that you need to do something really quickly because your overall account information might be in trouble. Another scam, you've won $100,000, which is fantastic. Now, obviously, we're not going to send it to you. Obviously, we're not going to ask you for bank information over the phone. There's way too many scams out there. All that we're going to ask you to do is to pre-send us a fee or to wire us the taxes ahead of time. So if you send us the $5,000 right now, we can release the $100,000, and obviously that is much better. Again, nobody would ever ask you to send money or ask you for bank information over the phone if they're a reputable financial company. Please don't do so. And you're like, oh, that would never happen to me. It does. And it happens to your elderly population. The next one happens to my mother-in-law, and she's so proud of this one. She gets calls all the time where scammers let them know that a family member is in trouble. Got arrested last night. He was a little drunk. We don't want to call the parents. He's so embarrassed. So he gave us your phone number. Grandma, can you please help him out? Just send some money so we can bail him out, and we don't want to tell his parents because he's so embarrassed. Here's the Western Union information. Just transfer some money. Let's help him out. It's important you help him. She thinks this is funny, my mother-in-law, because this has happened twice, where they would tell her that her grandson was in trouble. And she listens to the whole conversation. She thinks it's great to talk about where they are on vacation, if they're having a good time. And then she ends the conversation with, haha, I don't have a grandson, I only have granddaughters. And she hangs up, and then she calls me because she thinks it's so funny. I wish she didn't do that. I actually told her to get rid of her regular phone and just put her contacts of people that she knows in her cell phone, and those are the only phone numbers she should pick up going forward. Because anytime you have a conversation, even if you don't respond right away, you're pretty much sharing with these scammers that you're willing to have a conversation. And eventually some of them might be nice enough to actually get through. So try not to respond, but more important, if you get these type of calls, definitely do not give any type of information or send money. I'm going to keep scaring you. Sorry, I know we have a few minutes left. Instead of phone calls or emails, I get these myself all the time, even from banks that I don't bank with. Text scams. There seems to be an unauthorized transaction on your account, so we block your card. Please click here to verify your account information with a link. Hey, this is UPS. Unfortunately, your package will be delayed. Here, this is Amazon. We're having difficulty delivering your package. Please click here for tracking details or to share a better delivery date. Hi, I remember we had such a great time on your birthday. Remember this picture? You look so happy. Click here. I've received text messages, not just from Amazon and UPS and from banks. I've received text messages from people that looked like they were in my contact. People like that pretty much look for real. And I was like, wow, how is it possible that my brother-in-law is sending me a text that has to do with clicking on links, which normally wouldn't happen. Again, I work in this business, so I know what to look for. And I then reach out to my brother-in-law and be like, hey, what's happening? But I've received phone calls from my own phone number. I have a Florida area code, and scammers try to, either via text or via phone, they try to appear local, right? So it looks like they're close by and easier to track. I don't know how else to tell you, but do not respond to text messages, no matter how cool they look. Do not respond or click to emails when there's links in them. And the same thing that I tell my grandparents, do they really still need a phone, a house phone? And if they do, can you make sure that you just put in their contact information so they don't respond to too many calls? The ability to lose money that you can't get back is way too high, and there's just a lot of really smart scammers out there that you need to watch for. So it's scary information, but unfortunately it happens on a day-to-day basis. And like I mentioned, $3 billion was stolen from the elderly just last week. Just last year. So we don't necessarily need to speak of children identity theft, but I told you I have an 18-year-old. I'm actually going to start looking at her credit history to make sure that nobody has used her social early on. Tax identity theft. If people have access to your social security number, this is tax season. People might go online and apply for or file your taxes in your name to try to get a refund. And medical identity theft. More and more do we see people accessing medical information to try to get drug prescriptions or to actually get physical claims. All these forms of identity theft, if not prevented, can be looked at or caught early if you just monitor what happens on a regular basis. So last week in a budgeting class, we talked about budgeting apps, and we talked about looking at your bank statements and collecting all the information on where you spend your money. When we just talked about credit reporting, we talked about looking at your credit report on a regular basis. It's the same thing with other information that you receive from your doctors, from your medical insurers. If there's information that all of a sudden appears on your doorstep or that shows up in reporting that wasn't there before, there's some red flags, right? Incorrect medical bills, all of a sudden history information that wasn't there before, an IRS letter that talks about wages that you didn't see before. If you used to get a statement every month via mail and all of a sudden for 2 months you didn't receive a statement, certain bills don't pop up. If there is an actual denial that is sent to you for services or credit cards, if you see fluctuations or changes or you get calls that you normally didn't used to get, those are all red flags and activities that should not happen, that could kind of indicate something is happening with your information, and it's important for you to take a look and make sure that everything is okay. If you monitor your accounts on a regular basis, you monitor your financial statements, you remain safe online and safeguard your documents, and remain aware of your surroundings, the chance of you being a victim of identity theft are much lower than if you access public information all the time. Use passwords. The number one password in the US is password. Baffles me. Don't click on links, don't open attachments. I think I mentioned it a few times. Simply don't give people access to your information, allow them access to your information is the best way to prevent yourself. Another thing that I've done, and something that is something you might want to consider for the elderly as well, is credit monitoring services, right? There's different banks. M&T Bank is one of them. We actually, for all our checking account holders, offer a service that watches your credit report for free. There's also a service that you can pay for additional monitoring services. I have a freeze on my credit report, so no one can apply. They can look at my credit, but they can't apply, and I actually get an alert anytime that somebody looks at my credit report. So you have the ability, based on your own personal scenario, to monitor and be very active and proactive in how you want to monitor and protect yourself against identity theft. I like to do it because I'm pretty set in my ways for credit. I don't need to apply for new credit. So for me, it makes sense to freeze my credit report. And then if eventually I want to buy a house, I can unfreeze it just by going online to one of those credit agencies. But there's ways that your financial advisor can help you. How can I sign up for monitoring services? How can I sign up for freezes and protect people having access? If you are a victim of identity theft, and I truly hope you never will be, you need to collect all your information. You need to report it. You need to report it to the police. You need to go to the bank. You need to go to credit report and find ways to repair the damage. And it can take some time. I was never a victim of identity theft. I just had bad credit, and it took me almost 10 years to get out of it. So if you're an identity theft victim and your information is out there and being used incorrectly, it will take some time. So nobody wants to go through that. So hopefully we've given you some information or some ideas, at least, to protect yourself, or some strategies to keep looking at your credit report and to protect your information. Because that's what we were trying to do. And I got 5 minutes left. So shared some signs of identity theft and fraud, monitor. Look at different types of fraud and identity theft and some strategies to help protect you. Hopefully having some safe habits. Just like a budgeting and a savings plan, having a good credit score and protecting your identity It's all about having the habit of monitoring your daily activities, getting into the habit of leading a strong financial life. And these habits will help you keep a good score, being able to apply for loans and credit cards with the best possible rates, rebuild credit or a budgeting plan and a savings plan if you need to, and continue to protect your information. So it all starts with education. And again, M&T Bank, your resources at the Office of Economic Empowerment and the Executive Office of Elder Affairs online. financiallifema.org, your own bank. There's a lot of people that can help you. If you feel that you might be at risk, if you're somewhat nervous about any type of identity theft or credit difficulty, there's a lot of resources that can help. I hope that you will take the time to complete the exit interview. I know it's early in the morning. We had about an hour to make sure that we made this happen. But please complete the interview for us so we know for a fact that we have the ability to fine tune and improve in our workshops. I see in the chat the next sessions are already scheduled, morning and afternoon, for mobile banking as well as basic as home buying. And there's a lot of information available to you. So please take the time to look at the resources that you have and learn more, and always feel free to reach out. So I'm stopping my share. And if there's any questions, if somebody has a question that they would like to have answered, go right ahead in the Q&A. And if not, then I'm gonna hand it back to Jessica.
Thank you so much for that fantastic presentation, Dutch, as always, and no tech issues, at least not major ones. Woohoo. If you've been to any of these before, you know that's something that we really work on. But yes, everybody feel free to ask questions. And if you aren't comfortable asking questions here, I'll share my email, and you can definitely reach out if you would like to ask any questions of either of us, talk about setting up a scam and fraud prevention workshop for your residents if you do work with older adults. And if you would like more help signing up for next week's sessions. But yes, please feel free to ask anything. Otherwise, I'll let us close out this session, and I will make sure everybody gets the recording of this for today. And if you know anybody else who could benefit from this, we do have a session at 4 p.m. today. So please feel free to share that out to other people in your network and to people that you might have as your constituency, so that we can see them later today. But I think I'm not seeing anything come in, so I will let us go for the morning. I'll see you later this afternoon, Dutch, and hopefully some of your colleagues later on today, folks. And thank you everybody for coming, and thanks M&T for the fantastic presentation.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye all.